In today's episode, don't mess with Sandra. Too lazy to do your jobs? Well then, take care of the boxes. You demand we work overtime for free? Enjoy trying to open the store with no employees. So let's get started. Don't mess with Sandra. This tale was told to me as a warning when I started on my first post-college job. I am relating it exactly as it was told to me. This occurred in the early 80s, so those of you who've grown up with the internet may not understand how we did things in the olden days. There were no smartphone apps to show Q codes for airline tickets. They were paper, with red carbon mess. Reservations were done by phone. It was primitive by today's standards. Players' names have been changed, of course. Sandra, super sweet secretary loved by all. True, I worked with her. She was amazing. Fred, Sandra's boss. Tom, local VP. Big Shot, incoming manager from back east. Al, lead engineer on the team. This occurred in Salt Lake City, which, if you don't know, family was a huge part of culture. Even at work, family matters took precedence, and local management knew this and allowed for it. Well, Big Shot's office minions in another corporate location noticed some slight irregularities in time cards, like days off without pre-approved vacation requests. So he got himself transferred to the Salt Lake City office to straighten things out. He was pushy, and naturally, he was quickly hated. Big Shot ended up as a middle manager between Tom, at the top, and Fred. One morning, Sandra got a call from her daughter was unexpectedly in town and wanted to have lunch. Naturally, Fred and Tom gave her the okay. Big Shot didn't like that, although it wasn't explained why. Maybe it wasn't by the book, maybe he was upset that Sandra went over his head. In any event, he decided to stick his nose in. But rather than just say no, he dropped a last-minute urgent travel request on Sandra's desk, and it had to be done because he expected to fly out that afternoon. Sandra was heartbroken that she wouldn't get to see her daughter, but she had her work responsibilities. Stopping by to drop off some paperwork, Al noticed that Sandra looked a little down, a huge change from her normal chipper mood. He naturally asked why, and Sandra explained. Al told her he had no authority, by the way, to go have lunch and will take care of it. Big Shot got his travel packet, got on the plane that afternoon, and flew off to his meeting. That's when things started to go wrong. The rental car reservation was invalid, and there were no cars available at any of the agencies. All had a hold on them pending confirmation from some clients. So Big Shot ended up getting a rent-a-wreck. For those too young or not in the US, there really was a discount auto rental agency by that name. Quality was not job one. When Big Shot got to the hotel, he found that his reservation was no good. He had to wait around until after the tentative reservations expired, which was after 6 p.m. Getting suspicious, Big Shot looked at his tickets and found they were one-way. He had no flight home. To say Big Shot was incensed was probably an understatement. The next morning, Tom flew in to join him, and he gave Big Shot a packet that was marked extremely urgent that had been left on his desk with a note to take it to Big Shot. It was Big Shot's return ticket. On the way back, Big Shot detoured by the corporate head office and got a very senior exec to come with him because of some very serious personnel problems. The next morning, Big Shot led the senior exec and Tom into a meeting with all of Fred's department and began publicly berating Sandra for incompetence and so on. When he got to the part about the tickets, Fred interrupted and told the senior exec that Sandra couldn't have done that. She was on approved time off having lunch with her daughter. This raised the senior exec's eyebrows and got Big Shot even angrier. The senior exec said if Sandra didn't mess up the tickets, who did? Fred stepped forward. Then Al. And one by one, every single member of Fred's team stepped forward to take responsibility to protect Sandra from Big Shot's wrath. Tom and the senior exec knew instantly what had happened. Everyone on Fred's team had burned up the phones making tentative reservations for rental cars and hotel rooms, leaving Big Shot stuck with a one-way ticket, worthless reservations, and no alternatives. Within the hour, Big Shot's desk was empty and his badge had been turned in. It was never explained if Big Shot was fired or if he was just quickly relocated. The senior exec stuck around to get to know the team. He was very impressed with how the whole team stuck together and protected their own. After he finished telling me the tale, the engineer said bluntly, "Don't mess with Sandra. We love her, and we will make you pay if you upset her." Message received loud and clear. As I worked with Fred's team, I got to understand why everyone loved Sandra. She was an absolute gem in the organization, efficient, super friendly, just an all-around wonderful person. Too lazy to do your jobs? Well then, take care of the boxes. A bit of backstory: this was during my time I was working in retail. Every day, my department would get pallets of merchandise that needed to be stocked, usually after my coworkers and I would leave for the day, just before closing. I would work closing one week, opening shift the following week, weekends off. During that time, we would have several groups of overnight coworkers, assigned to different departments to stock merchandise brought in on the delivery trucks, and then put any overstock in the back, clean up the cardboard boxes. The opening shift would take care of any overstock pallets the overnights didn't have time to get to. Every week, each group of overnight employees would be rotated to different departments. Unfortunately, there was one group of overnight employees that had a bit of a reputation for being lazy, and those guys were assigned to my department for the week. At the time when this happened, I was working my opening shift, years before COVID. The wrongs being done during the week wasn't so much being done to just me, it was being done to my other coworkers in my entire department, so this was pretty much a group effort. On with the story. My coworkers and I get to our department to find 4 pallets of merchandise, saran wrapped, labeled as overstock. We double-checked the pallets and the shelves and find out that it needed to be worked. We were pissed. By that time, the department manager and supervisor found out, and they were absolutely livid. So we ended up working the merchandise, putting them on the shelves. I was getting ready to start breaking down the boxes when I got this wicked idea. My idea was to stack all of the empty boxes, like they were full, wrap them up, and label them as overstock, but I wanted to get the approval from my supervisor first. When I talked to my supervisor, I mentioned what I wanted to do. My supervisor chuckled at the idea, approved it, and explained what had happened to him last year. Apparently a year before, the overnight employees played a prank on him. On April 1st, they had left 2 pallets of merchandise wrapped up and labeled as overstock. He said he double-checked, only to find out that all of the boxes on the pallets were empty. He gathered all of us in the department, explained what we were doing, and we got to work. The supervisor explained that if it should happen again, we should inform him, work the merchandise, restock the empty boxes as if they are full, wrap them, label them as overstock, and leave the pallets for the overnighters. Unfortunately, my opening coworkers and I were done for the day. We were at 2 pallets. Fortunately, our closing coworkers were there when the supervisor explained what he wanted done. The next day, we walk in, more pallets of overstock merchandise. Supervisor was informed, basically, rinse and repeat for the rest of the week. The last day of the week, however, we walk in. To our surprise, there was only 1 pallet. It had 7 pallets stacked on top of it, with a handwritten "Go F#K yourselves" label on it. We informed the supervisor. He informed us that the overnight group assigned to our department were terminated by the store manager. You demand we work overtime for free? Enjoy trying to open the store with no employees. First off, on mobile, non-English speaker. Second, unfortunately, this story came back to mind due to the recent death of the hero of the story. Grumpy, you will be missed. I've met Grumpy in Narcotics Anonymous. He volunteered there after they helped him and became my sponsor. Seeing that I was trying to get my shit together, he offered me my first job out of high school. Grumpy was the manager of a store for a company that sold everything you needed to build a house. From cement and bricks to custom-made cupboards. I started as a loader, filling the trucks that were making deliveries. A little background for the company, it plays an important for later. When they started, back in the early 80s, they sold everything you needed to build a brick and mortar home wholesale to professionals. During their first expansion, they got a really good reputation for their prices of power tools, custom cupboards and landscaping, including custom-made garden furnitures. The stores were basically big warehouses. In mid-90s, they opened their doors to the general public, which, accompanied by a rising tent of DIY, skyrocketed their sales. That brought a second, smaller wave of expansion and the opening of the online store, first only with phone orders and later with a proper site. When I joined, they were doing a third shift on their business plan. They had cut down on things that weren't a big seller, like bricks and concrete, and were focusing more on the big sellers, custom-made furniture, landscaping, tools and, for some weird reason, plumbing. My first 8 months on the job was a dream. Grumpy was an excellent manager. Having started in the company roughly the same age I was and being promoted through the ranks, had developed a very distinct managerial style. His concept was simple: if my employees are happy, they work better and provide better services, which leads to better sales. That meant that while Grumpy managed one of the inner city stores, meaning medium to small size compared to others, we were fourth in revenue nationwide and first in customer happiness. And then the reason for his nickname Stroke. While everyone called him Grumpy, a nickname he was kind of proud of, he was far from it. The reason was he had a medical condition that affected his nerves and had left him with a permanent frown on his face. He had declined promotion due to that condition, knowing the extra stress would make his condition flare up, meaning he wouldn't be as effective as he would like. His medical condition flared up unexpectedly and Grumpy had to be hospitalized and be on sick leave for a time. HQ decided to not have one of Grumpy's assistants be an acting manager for the duration, but bring in a regional manager to take over the store for the duration. Let's call him Wilhelm. Wilhelm was the exact opposite of Grumpy. He was younger than Grumpy, he was in his late 20s, Grumpy was in his late 30s, had a business degree, and he hadn't worked the floor at all. He was hired from the beginning as an office drone and climbed his way to regional manager. The reason he was put in charge of our store had to do with the change of the business plan of the company. You see, the change of focus had created a lot of empty space in the stores. A supermarket chain had approached the company with an offer to rent the empty space, especially for inner-city stores. The company had accepted and placed regional managers in key stores to help with integration. The thing is, the supermarket chain had a reputation of being bad employers. That was reinforced by one of our tellers, who had worked for them for 3 years before quitting to join us. Wilhelm didn't help also. His managerial style was based in only one concept: make more money in any way possible. He started by changing our schedule from monthly to weekly, raising the sales targets to unrealistic heights and always demanded more. In the first 2 weeks, 6 experienced people had left, 4 quitted and 2 fired, and replaced by young, inexperienced people that were easier to manipulate. And then, the integration happened. The floor was the first to feel the problem. The supermarket opened its doors and was understaffed. Wilhelm started sending people over to help for 4 to 6 hours, while also demanding to work their regular shifts. If someone declined, she was written up. 2 write-ups in 6 months and you were fired. Then Wilhelm came to lay the law in the loading bay. The loading bay was shared between the 2 stores. Wilhelm declared that we had first helped the 2 guys of the supermarket unload their trucks first, because their products were perishable, and then started loading our own trucks. That would throw our delivery schedule to the wind. The loading crew worked 5 to 1,300 hours. We loaded first the trucks that had longer to travel, so they will be ready to leave at 7 o'clock at the latest. The company had a next-day delivery policy for a 150 miles radius. What Wilhelm declared meant we couldn't start loading our trucks before 7:30, and they couldn't start their route before 9:30. We said as much, but Wilhelm didn't care. He said we had to do both jobs. When someone inquired about overtime, Wilhelm said no. He said we already made too much money with unsocial hours, 5 to 8 o'clock, and leaving early, so he wouldn't approve overtime. So, from a nice environment that you wanted to work for, we all started getting miserable. We lost 10 people in the loading crew in a month because of the new rules. The new hires didn't last long. The floor was a mess also, started turning personnel faster than a dollar hooker. Anyone who is staying is either looking for another job, is afraid of unemployment, or is too young to know better. The sales had a very small decline, but customer happiness is plummeting fast. After almost 6 months, all the old guard that was left was ready to quit. But our savior came back. Almost 6 months from the day he was hospitalized, Grumpy walks in the store to claim his rightful position. He isn't a knight in shining armor, riding a pure white horse, carrying a legendary sword. He is in a normal attire, slightly limping and holding a cane. We have a welcome back party, and have a small glimmer of hope now he is back. We are informed that Grumpy will be on light duties for 2 weeks, before he becomes the manager again. Despite Grumpy being back, Wilhelm still remains the regional manager, which means he outranks Grumpy, and makes it very clear in private meetings with all of us. If he caught us complaining to Grumpy, we were as good as gone. Still, a few of us are planning to have a meeting with Grumpy after the weeks, letting him get his sea legs back. But another department had other ideas. During his reign of terror, the only department that Wilhelm couldn't control was the workshop. He knew that if he treated them as bad as he did to us, they would quit and the sales would go from a small decline to bottom of the barrel real quick. As I said, custom-made furniture was the #1 seller. So, the head carpenter has a meeting with Grumpy on his second day talking about the future of the workshop. In reality, the guy spilled the beans on Wilhelm. With the pretext of catching up with the changes, Grumpy has meetings with everyone, learning what Wilhelm had done and why we had so many new staff. You could feel he was getting angrier with every meeting. He had also had an eye-opening meeting with the manager of the supermarket. Finally, the time had come that he is the manager again. The revenge. On his first day back as a manager, Grumpy notifies everyone of a mandatory meeting after the store is closed. He has a solution. So gather in the store after closing hours. And Grumpy lays out the plan. For the next couple of days, nobody except him is coming to the store. If anyone calls us, we should direct them to him. Which we did, when we started getting calls about the store being closed. Grumpy's answer to the HQ was simple: the staff was working on a second job during their shifts, which is a breach of contract, so I had to fire them all and find new staff. That caught HQ's attention, because nothing of the sort was reported in the past 6 months. They asked Grumpy for evidence, which he happily provided with our written testimonies. Which brought a shitstorm on Wilhelm. You see, Wilhelm had an arrangement with the supermarket manager. He got a kickback from our unpaid labor for the supermarket, and the manager offered the same thing to Grumpy. He also included that Wilhelm regularly declined to sign overtime, which meant that if any one of us went to the labor department, the company would get a really huge fine. The aftermath. Wilhelm quickly got fired. We all received calls to interview with the company for an open position. We all received severance pay for our firing plus most of the unpaid overtime, about 80% of it. Almost all of us went back to work with a small pay raise based on experience. The company took a long, hard look on the supermarket chain and distanced themselves from them. They stayed until their lease was over, but no shared employees anymore, and a lot of theirs jumped ship to our side. Next time Grumpy had to take time off, one of his assistants took over. 2 did a stellar job, leading to be promoted to managers in other stores. Grumpy brought back his usual managerial style, leading again to a rise of sales and customer happiness. I left the job 3 years later for a better paying position, but I still remember Grumpy as one of the best managers I ever had. Thanks for watching.